So thank you for a very kind introduction. And I guess the com.org kind of presages the fit and misfit of my talk with that conference, because when I got my blog, I just thought, I won't get the com. I don't know what I was thinking. Because a lot of what I do is not about the business and the branding side of this talk, but eerily, I found many themes similar that might face brands that might have faced Mubarak last year too. So I'll try to talk about how those dynamics actually worked in the case of the uprisings in the Arab Spring, and how some of the underlying themes and concepts that we learned from that. And I do need to warn you, I was looking at his pictures and I was thinking, my pictures, my photos are going to be, I just want to warn people that if you're squeamish, you should look away. Occasionally I'll try to warn you, because all of last year I've been very used to seeing many, many graphic photos, and I think my threshold for showing pictures of injured people has been lower than, has been lowered, unfortunately, throughout last year. But my name is Zeynep Tufekci. And yes, that's a K before the C. I apologize. It's Turkish, so we do those unusual things. And I'm an assistant professor at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I'm also a fellow at the Berkman Harvard Center for Internet and Society. Now, I think I'm operating it with the, there we go. So I want to talk about the breaking of the autocratic model. And I want to talk about that by starting with the wrong questions. I do not remember how many times last year I have seen this formulation. Was it Facebook or the people? Or was it online or offline? And I just want to say yes, or I want to say no, depending on how you phrase the question, because that is absolutely the wrong question. And I see this a lot of times, this conceptualization in online and offline worlds as if they were separate and we're supposed to somehow decide which one is more important, when the reality is obviously, and this is true for, if you just sort of start thinking about your own lives, is that it's integrated, it's augmented, use it whichever term you want to use, but it's not like that the internet is the matrix, and we have this real-world Zion out there that are completely separate, but rather they're integrated. It's an integration that's quite interesting because it's an integration of bits and atoms which have different properties, right? With bits, it's fairly easy to copy them, preserving their organization. With atoms, it's not. You can't just, beam us up elsewhere, Scotty, the way you can on science fiction. And the fact that it's integrated, but it's an integration of bits and atoms with different properties, has a lot of consequences. And this has consequences if you're a brand, this has consequences if you're an aging autocrat in the Middle East, because many things that can be used to control the world of atoms cannot be used the same way to control the world of integrated bits and atoms. The old methods do not work, and that is what the aging autocrats of the Middle East have discovered last year. So was it online, was it offline? Yes. Was it Facebook, was it people? Yes, both. Obviously, if you want to give credit, it will go to the people who braved the snipers, the bullets, the shelling. They do so today. So if you want to give credit, absolutely. I mean, it's the people that I think about and that I worry about and that I care about. But if you're looking at it analytically, it's clear that the spread of the internet played an integral part in the story that is still going on. So the right questions for me are, how is the public sphere transformed when you have a new platform that does not allow control the way you had it? And how is the infrastructure of connectivity altered? And there are a lot of subtle ways in which these factors play out in terms of not just the Arab Spring, but we've seen all over the world. For example, infrastructure of connectivity is a very different kind of beast if people are organized into clumps, which you can separate, versus they're organized into one big network that is densely interconnected. If you want to use sort of mathematical language, the graph theory that people use to do network analysis call these giant components where everything is connected to each other. as opposed to, say, a hub and spoke model like airline hubs where there's clumps of people, but there's not that many connections necessarily between them. And increasingly, we have a world in which everything is so heavily connected that you're seeing the impacts in US politics. Every primary is like a national race, right? Everything local has become this big national political process because everything is so densely interconnected. And that is a very different world than the world of people just talking to each other through one-to-one methods. Okay, so augmented world when bits and atoms integrate. I think I realize I need to point to this direction to make this, there we go. So the public sphere revolution, I want to talk about this website that you might have heard about and explain why it was so important. This is a website from the Arabic version of We Are All Khalid Said website. This is the website that was administered famously by the ex-Google executive Wael Ghonim. There's an English version too. Now, what does it mean to have a website like this? What is the point of this? What happened then in the Arab uprisings, the Arab Middle East, the public sphere was heavily controlled and censored, such that it's not that these people, the autocrats, were popular. No, they were quite unpopular by all measures you can look at. And it's not that people didn't really know that these autocrats were not doing a good job. They did. I mean, these people have been in power for 30, 40 years, and these countries have been not doing so well in pretty much every way you measure it. But what you don't know in an autocracy is how many of your fellow countrymen and women feel like you and what they might do. Now let me try to give you an example. Let's say you're all sitting there and thinking, she's really boring. What's she doing here? I want to hear something else. I mean, you're just thinking this to yourself. Now I'm thinking this is not the best example I picked, but we'll just go with it for the moment. And you're thinking, I want to go get some coffee, or it's a gorgeous day outside, and did I really register for this? So you're still thinking this, and you're really not going to get up and do that, probably. Bad example, just hypothetical. But imagine where a lot of you are thinking this, and there's a back channel. There's a hashtag, BRITEConf, and people start talking, saying, you know what, it's really nice and sunny outside, and I don't know what the heck she's talking about. And this kind of starts gathering steam. You can really see how that could have not a great impact on how the rest of my talk goes if this gathers speed. Now, let's say that you kindly are checking to make sure this is not happening, and you want to sort of snuff this out. If it's fast, it might be very hard. Let's say you are Davis trying to block and report spam to everybody who's making these claims, but it's too fast. You can't do it. You can't just do it fast enough. And I was like, dutifully, BRITEConf, the hashtag was getting spam because it started trending, I suppose. And I was dutifully clicking on block and report spam, and I couldn't keep up with it. You know what? That was Mubarak's problem, too. When you have a million people who say, I like this. When you have the January 25th, the uprising in Egypt was a Facebook page invitation. This must be the first revolution in history where people clicked on, yes, I accept the invitation to show up at the revolution, and showed up. Now, this is very important because the worst kind of participation in an autocratic model is to be in a small revolution, to be in a small attempt. Because if you're there with a few people, you can be crushed. If in Facebook, and Egyptians have very large social networks, and Facebook, we complain about this sometimes, makes it hard for you to segment your audiences. That is not great if you're trying to make sure your mom doesn't see what your friends just posted. But that is great if you're a political activist, because things can go viral very quickly, and people could use this website to say, I'm with the opposition, and see their social networks were also there. And when the first day of the January 25th, the protests came, there were thousands of people rather than the few hundred. Yes, there's a lot more to the story. I'm simplifying to explain one aspect of it. So just to make sure, there's a whole host of reasons, going from previous organizing to labor unions to all of that. I'm not discounting any of that. I'm just trying to highlight the role displayed. So public is a meta concept. Public is not just about what you know. It's about what you know others know, and that you know that they know, right? That concept, political scientists call this pluralistic ignorance, when everybody has a minority view that everybody has a view that they think is a minority view because they don't know others share their view. This is pluralistic ignorance, when you're actually the plurality, but you're ignorant of the fact that you're the plurality because of information flow structure. And nothing like social media to overcome that. And this is important to you. If I saw a hashtag by McDonald's get completely taken over just about a few weeks ago by people who wanted to say not so nice things about McDonald's, right? So you can not just be out there in the public sphere and have a dependence on pluralistic ignorance of sorts if your brand has that kind of issue. So I'm not going to show a squeamish-inducing picture. I don't know. I'm going to show a picture of Neda Aga Sultan from the 2009 Iranian uprising. This became like the picture that represented that uprising. She became the face of it. This is her bleeding to death on a sidewalk. So look away if you do not want to see this. This is horrible. She's a young woman taking part in a protest. She got shot by a sniper, probably on a rooftop or on a motorcycle that we do not know yet. And there was somebody with a cell phone camera near her. And this is actually a video. This is a still from a video. And this shocked everybody. This shocked everybody, not just in Iran, but around the world. And I know the Green Revolution the Green Uprising in Iran did not succeed, obviously. But this was a turning point in people in the region realizing we can get the pictures, we can get our story out. And I think the world has never looked back. I once talked to YouTube's news director. YouTube is probably the biggest news organization in the world today. She told me that within an hour of something happening somewhere in the world, we have a video. That is an amazing, different kind of world. So our next picture, again, it's another, this is an injured Syrian kid just last week. It's horrible. Everything, if you're just following the news, it's getting unbearable. It has been for a while. And every day, my Twitter stream is full of hundreds of videos from around Syria. And this is in spite of intensive efforts by that regime to stop this flow. They've done everything. I mean, you know that a couple of New York Times journalists were killed very recently by probably being targeted by triangulation of their sat modem signal because the country is flooded with satellite modems. They cut the phone lines, people smuggled in satellite modems. They're now, trying to triangulate and shell exactly where the satellite modem is operating from, and people are now putting stuff on the USB sticks and going through smuggling routes on, backs of donkeys. They're trying everything, but every day still dozens or hundreds of videos are coming out. This is a different revolution. If something is happening somewhere, there is going to be video of it, and if there's a video, somebody's going to discover it. Brands have discovered this. If your back room has your employees not behaving so well in videotaping themselves, well, this is going to come out. Now, this is another picture from the Egyptian uprising. This is last February 2011. And this is a picture from the Battle of the Camel. Before Mubarak stepped down, there was this moment where the regime decided, people are gathered in Tahrir, hundreds of thousands strong. Internet is either cut or blocked, depending on the day. And the regime decided to send thugs on camels and horseback to try to scare the crowds and beat them up with sticks. Now, I interviewed in one of my interviews in Cairo, and I interviewed an activist about this day. And he told me, when I saw the camels and horses, I thought, we won, this is great, we won. And I thought, what, you'd lost it then? I mean, lack of sleep, something? He said, no, I knew that moment we won. I said, why? He said, because this is what we were doing. they had cut off the internet and electricity, and we had, hacked into all the sort of light poles and were getting some electricity with satellite modems that had been smuggled from other countries to do live hookups to CNN and BBC and giving interviews, and they were attacking us with camels. 17th century, meet 21st century. And you know how that one went. He said we knew that moment that they were not up to being able to control this. This is not to say there are no effective ways and governments aren't learning, but camels and horses and thugs, that's not really going to work. This is a Patrick Bass photo. Now, I want to briefly talk about another aspect of it. What I'm trying to do is not give you guys a rundown of the history, but sort of the conceptual underlyings of why social media, internet, and connectivity are changing political dynamics. Okay, so I want to tell you guys a story of a Twitter feed called Tahrir Supplies. So this one came up in the November of 2011. There have been repeated clashes. Things are far from settled. Egypt and Tunisia and all of them, they're very complicated countries with multiple dynamics. So there were more clashes in November of 2011 when I noticed a little Twitter feed from the corner of my eye trying to get attention saying, hey, we're going to coordinate supplies to field hospitals. Now, the background to this is that during the clashes in November of 2011, they were severe. Dozens of people died. So it's not a joke. It's not like a small, bunch of protesters and police and just sort of shouting slogans. We're talking bullets and tear gas being fired like a gun at the protesters, which does kill. Tear gas made in the US, by the way. Not great for our diplomatic efforts. So there's a lot of injuries. Thousands of people got injured, lots of people getting killed. To respond, the protesters set up 10 field hospitals around the region, and the battle is going on in a street near Tahrir called Mahmud. But of course, you're seeing all these tweets saying, we need this, we need betadine, we need that, but it's not clear who needs what, right? And where do you get it? This Twitter feed wanted to coordinate this. And I saw them get set up. And I started talking to them a little because they were running afoul of Twitter's rate of tweeting. So I was trying to tell them, you got to go a little slow. So we started talking, but I didn't really want to bug them then. They were trying to do something. I watched them within just a day set up this feed, have a website, some, Google Docs and spreadsheets, and lots of other things going on. I watched them coordinate 10 field hospitals. Seriously, they took over the whole logistics of it, and they coordinated this. And since this is happening a lot on Twitter, and I'm familiar with this whole landscape very well, I really saw how successful they were. And everybody, all the field doctors and the hospitals started using them. And then you had this thing saying, the one by, this mosque, we have a little extra gauze, and we need that, and do you have antibiotics? It just started working. And I was like amazed at how well this worked. So after the clashes calmed down a little, I talked with these, the people who organized this. I said, I want to talk to you. Who are you? What did you do? So it turns out that the idea came from a 22-year-old who started this. He wasn't even in Cairo. One of them was in Cairo, one of them was in Dubai, one of them is in London. There are 3 kids. And kids, they're in their 20s. I'm sorry, I'm getting old. People in their 20s are kids to me. And the 22-year-old who started this told me that he got the idea from cupcakes. I'm like, cupcakes? He said, well, you see, there's this cupcake store in Cairo I really like. And I watched how they used the Twitter feed of this cupcake store, Nola Cupcakes, to coordinate and sell and promote cupcakes. And it was really successful. I thought, cupcakes, field hospitals, we can probably do this. And I thought, okay, so you looked at a cupcake store to get inspiration, to solve a problem. That is the reason that Napoleon did not manage to invade, Moscow. That is the reason that Hitler's army got bogged down. You thought you could coordinate, thousands of injuries in 10 field hospitals on an inspiration on a cupcake store's Twitter feed? I was like, yeah. And it worked. They didn't sleep much for a week. 3 of them alternated around the clock, and some spreadsheets and lots of Twitter activity and phones, of course. They called people a lot too. And they successfully coordinated 10 field hospitals. So my last story is kind of how this does and does not work sometimes. And this is Rami Jarrar, a Syrian dissident. This is his Twitter avatar. He's a business person. He was fairly successful. But when the uprising started, he started acting like a spokesperson in some sense because he spoke English really well. And he just somehow got contacted by news organizations. So he started giving them live updates from inside Syria. The regime soon found out who he was. And he got a call, somebody sympathetic from inside, who said, run, get out now. And he just ran with his wife and baby daughter to the border, escaped within an inch of his life. He just escaped within an inch of his life, we're sure of that. And he went to Cairo. And he goes around. He still acts in this capacity, and his real name is now known. So last December, I saw this tweet from him from the corner of my eye. He was traveling to Qatar to take part in a conference that he was invited. But something was wrong with his bureaucratic papers. Something about his visa wasn't right, and we don't know still. And the bureaucrat at the border said, there's something wrong with your visa. We need you we're going to deport you. He's like, okay. What's he going to do? They said, you're Syrian, so we're going to deport you to Syria. See, in the border, if you are being deported, you get deported to your country of origin. This is a standard practice. It caused a lot of problems if you cannot go back to your country of origin. And he was like, you cannot send me back to Syria. Send me back to Cairo. I don't care. Send me back to anywhere in the world. So he tried to explain to them, and this is the next tweet you got. You're from Syria. This is where you go. Now, this is happening on a Sunday afternoon, Eastern time. It's the middle of the night in Qatar, and we're watching this and thinking, oh, my God, we're not even going to have time to do a free Rami hashtag. The moment he goes back, he'll just be tortured and killed. It's like, what do you do? Middle of the night. A Twitter network, and also, of course, back channels, people emailing, we just sprung, and everyone's trying to find some way to get him out of there because he's in Qatari airport. So this is how it happened. This is how sometimes you need the 17th century back in. We found, this is what I call a syncretic problem, because you have 20th century bureaucrats. It's Kafka, right? There's something wrong on your document, we're going to send you back to Syria. You have a 21st century network. We needed a 17th century solution, a sheikh. Now, I've shown this before, and I have no idea if this guy's a sheikh. It's just, when I go through Google Images, I'm from Turkey, but, I have my Orientalist side. I think of this. I don't know. This is better, probably. I think this one actually is a sheikh. I don't know. But it looks like one to me. But this is most likely what is happening, is a big house with Rolls Royces. That's probably reality. Because what actually happened was that some people in our network found somebody in Qatar who could call a sheikh in the middle of the night and say, we need you. Well, I don't know what they said. I don't know how you have this conversation with a sheikh saying, it's 3 a.m., I'm waking you up, and dude, we need you? I don't know, what do you say? Whatever he said, our contact said, it worked. We got a very important kind of person to, on the network found someone to go that last mile to pluck him out of Qatari immigration and say, okay, he's with me now. So sometimes you need the 17th century back to solve that last mile. And I have seen this again and again, how old power and new power integrate. So it's an ecology, right? It's an ecology. It's not just, you can't just work with the 21st century networks, and sometimes the 17th century loses. Sometimes that's what you need. It's fairly complicated. This is a picture I took from in Tahrir during a protest, and that right there is the light of the Al Jazeera camera, kind of protectively looking over Tahrir, focusing the world's attention. And that's a protester just taking photos. And this, I have a paper coming out from Journal of Communication in just a few days, hopefully, if there are any academics in the room, that we did a protester survey during the protests, a sample size of 1,000, a snowball sample because of the conditions. And about half the protesters in Tahrir during that time were using their phones or other means to document the protests, and they were uploading it mostly to Facebook. If you project these numbers, even very conservatively, there must have been tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe of citizen journals in Tahrir during the uprisings. You can't keep anything from happening. But if you have no Al Jazeera, it doesn't get out necessarily either, right? So it's an ecology with new players. So it's not simple. Now, social media means more participation. But I don't want to just say more participation is always good or always more democratic. It's much more complicated. The scholars of my generation are probably, like my previous generation, the scholars I read as important people, many of them, I think their nightmares were defined by World War II, you know, the Auschwitz-Birkenau of the world, that kind of the horrors that the world lived through that during that period. I think that's what is dominated in terms of their nightmares. And probably the civil rights movement is what dominates our hopes, well, of a scholarship of that era. My nightmares are more Rwanda. This is a picture that is from the Rwanda-Zaire border, right after the genocide, 1994. This is people leaving behind their machetes. And there's a very important story of participatory social media and how tech becoming cheaper can have consequences you hadn't thought. Machetes became very cheap around that time, and 750,000 were imported right before the genocide, partly to carry out that genocide. In fact, this has been cited as an evidence of why that was a planned genocide. And in the Radio Rwanda, something I think people who read about social media should read about, was a small media that was fairly participatory and was used to organize and incite this genocide. So more participation does not automatically, and this, I'm giving a very extreme example, but I want to show that you don't just get from more participation to just nice things, kittens and whiskers and all that, automatically. It's a very complicated story of how that may or may not play. And I think we have to think about the downsides and the dangers of technology becoming cheaper and people being able to organize in ways that were unprecedented. So the machetes, 10 cents, they became 10 cents, 20 cents machete. The country got flooded with these killing tools. And the Rwandan genocide was committed by a large number of people. So maybe 100,000 people killed about 800,000 people. So you can see that it's not always just these organized things. So change is here. So governments are adapting, but I think a key theme is that if you run your model based on unaccountable power, if especially these are your methods, information monopolies, this is Middle East, but it applies elsewhere too. Control over focusers like television, like Al Jazeera, like newspapers. Control over things that focus people's attention. Pluralistic ignorance, which I talked about. Divide and conquer or speed advantage. If your model of power, if your model of organizing is based on these, as it is for a lot of autocrats in the world, but I think you can see why this applies to all groups with power. Well, expect to be challenged. These young women whose picture I took in Tahrir during a protest, well, they might be coming for those organizations and groups too. Thank you.